Hi, I'm Keith. Mark's behind the camera. And today I'm going to paint a mailbox. Basically, yeah. Sorry.
It's all the fun stuff.
Yeah. So, yeah, Mark's got me a paintbrush. I got to go out and do the yard. So, but anyway, the idea behind this lesson is we're going to do an old mailbox on an old post. And basically, I'm going to be kind of introducing you to rust and very old wood, how to paint both of those things. So at this point, I'm going to begin by starting with the post. And I'm going to take my indigo, which is a blue-black. It's very pretty. I like it better than black because it's just a little more, it's got a little more life to it. But anyway, we're not using it as a super dark right now. I'm using it as a very light color, and so I'm adding a lot of water to it. What I'm doing is putting down my base color. So I'm dragging this down the post. As you can see, what I am doing is not, repeat, not wetting the surface first. And I'm kind of using the side of my brush. I don't know if you can see this. I'm not using the tip. I'm kind of dragging my brush down the side, on its side, and dragging down this paint. So what I like to do is I've got a little color down. We're going to put a little more. All right. And I like to vary the color a little bit. We're trying for an old barnwood look, okay, or an old post that's seen much better days. The other thing we're going to be working on is the mailbox itself. It's going to be all rusted out. It still works, but it's pretty bad. So for that, I'm going to use a little burnt sienna, which I put down in my tray, and I add water. And I'm going to put a very light coat on the mailbox itself too. So now I don't have to cover it, but I want to hit a lot of it. So again, you can kind of use your brush. However, this is a little smaller, so a little bit harder to maybe drag the color down at first. But as you can see, I'm still kind of using the side of my brush. And that way I don't hit everything. It leaves some lights.
Now that's one of your Lowell Cornell.
Yes, 70-20 Lowell Cornell Ultra Rounds, and they're a very nice brush. I use them all the time. I like them. They're you know, Teflon. It's not like you know, mink or squirrel or some super fancy brush. Very fair price. They hold up well. And when they do get old, I just kind of turn them into wash brushes after that. They have a very good tip on them, and they hold their fine tip. I do a lot of detail work. If you like watercolors with a little bit of detail to them, then you really do want, you know, something that's gonna basically hold together and give you a nice fine line if you need it. So as you can see, I'm kind of just dragging a little more of that burnt sienna down. I'm not too worried if it's, you know, perfect. I'm more just kind of getting a little base coat of color in here. So, all right, that looks pretty good.
And those are your Schminky pan paints?
They are. These Schminkies is a German brand. These are pan paints. They are they have no liquid in them, so they're solid color. So it's pure ground pigment, and it's very powerful color. You pay more for them, but they last a lot longer. You get a lot more painting done. A kit like this, the one I have now, as a professional watercolorist, this will last me 2-3 years. Uh, it's a great way to paint. I once I got into pan paints, I fell in love. So I've gotten my burnt sienna. I've got my indigo down on the post. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kill time. I want to, basically what I'm doing is I'm waiting for these items to dry. So in the meantime, I'm going to grab a little bit of my May green and just a little bit of my cerulean blue. I'm going to kind of make a bit of a happy green, and I mean happy. I'm just going to add a little more blue to it. There we go. And there we go. I'm going to put a little bit of a base color down here. I'm going to do this to create a little bit of grass. Mark was not happy with the amount of yellow and dead grass I was doing last time. So this time we got some spring green going here.
This time we have live grass, but a dying mailbox.
Yes, exactly. We like to mix it up. So as you can see, I'm doing it dry. I'm just kind of dragging my brush. I'm just kind of getting base coat of color down. Yeah, that'll work. And we'll be putting various sticks and twigs back there. As I finish things, we'll add more color. I also think while I'm at it, I'm going to put a little of the sky color in. Now again, this time I did not wet it, but I'm thinking maybe you should. Okay. But yeah, I would maybe put a little base coat of water down so that you don't end up, you'll end up with streaks, basically. It'll look like brush strokes if you don't get it fast enough, if you don't grab onto the paint and kind of move it around quick enough. It'll kind of look like you were painting it rather than the water flowing and moving around. I know how long it takes for the paint to dry, that kind of thing. So I tend to know what I'm doing as far as, getting the water, getting the paint kind of smeared around. But for you, seriously, let's possibly, I recommend if you're doing, large areas of background or something, definitely wet the paper. Because when you drop the color in, then it'll move around. It'll be very easy to manipulate. So, all right. So right now I'm just kind of doing what I said I should have been doing very quickly. Now, I consider this, I don't know, not necessarily a finished painting or a work of art. To me, this is more of a kind of like a study of how to, get the feeling of working with this wood. Working with rust, that kind of thing. So, anyway.
Bring it a little bit that way.
Which way? Okay. So, as you can see, what a happy, springy sky color. What a happy, springy grass colors. Yep. Michigan, we survived our winter, and now we're moving on to better times, happier times. I love when winter's done. Sun stays out all day. I get up early. I get to do a lot of work. All right, so we got background, foreground. We got us a mailbox with a post. So now I am going to actually take a break. And I'm going to let these the background colors set and dry. And then we'll go in and we're going to start making detail. And I should be able to finish this, honestly, fairly quickly. I always tell Mark that and then prove myself wrong. So, but let's try, okay? Let's take a break right here. All right, I've got my background dried up now, ready to do a little bit of detail work. I'm going to start with the old post first. I am going to use a little smaller brush now. This is actually a number 2. I'm going to drag a little bit of color down. I'm going to start with the burnt sienna, or no, I'm sorry, with the indigo. And again, I'm almost going to kind of use a little bit of the side of my brush. And as you can see, I am not wetting the paper first. This is more of a, I'm just going to start dragging some color down. This is the indigo.
So in general, dry brush techniques are more to create texture, hard texture?
Maybe more detail rather than, although sometimes texture is an issue. But no, I would think of it more as a detail thing. When it's wet, it's going to kind of bloom, whereas a dry paper, you're going to be able to hold your lines, that kind of thing. I'm kind of trying to figure out. There we go. Which one was indigo? I've got it. All right. So now at this point, I'm going to mix a tiny bit of the burnt sienna and a little bit of the indigo to give me kind of a brownish gray. And what I'm going to do is I like to kind of just drag this color down. As you can see, it doesn't have to be very clean or very straight. In fact, I'm even kind of just dragging my brush to get these textures. And this will represent the kind of the wood that's all split. I like to then take a little bit of water. I was going to go into Bob Ross style there in a second. We're going to take a little water. We're going to paint a little squirrel. All right. So I'm getting a little shadow under the mailbox itself. I'm making it a little darker up here, okay? So that's a little bit of shadow I'm just throwing in there. But as you can see, I can then take this and drag a little of that line work down. Now, if the paper, I want you to kind of pay attention here. I'm going to lightly, ever so lightly wet this. Okay, not a lot of water. But now when I take my brush, and if I try to do a fine line, it really, as you can see, where it's kind of drier, the paint doesn't bleed. But where it's a little bit wetter, do you see how it bleeds away here? This is what kind of gives it that really rough textured and variation. So what are the
grain?
Yeah, the grain. Thank you. I was trying to, what is that? The thin lines in the wood. Yeah, the grain. You can see the grain, and it's fun with old wood because the splits in the grain, it varies. And this is what gives it that very old look. Now, the other part that I like to do is I like to vary the color a little bit also. Okay, so now I'm using a little more on the burnt sienna side, and I'm coming in, and where it's still a little bit moist, my voice cracked. I add I'm adding a little more color, a little more paint into these kind of damp areas. And I'm going to add a little bit of water. And what that does is it'll take the paint, it'll push the paint up against the edges where it's dry, okay? And it'll actually create hard lines. And I get so much detail out of this without working very hard. It's actually letting the water, letting the paint do the job for you. So again, all I'm doing at this point is I drag these lines down. Where it's wet, it's going to blur. It's still wet up in here, so it kind of blurred a little bit. Again, I'm going to vary up my color a little bit, grab a little more burnt sienna. And where it's wet, I'm going to just add a little more color. We're gonna paint a happy post. All right. So as you can see, dropping, this is a technique, this is kind of like dropping one color into another color, and it doesn't just blend together and it's a new color. What it does is actually I'm kind of pushing one color out of the way, forcing another one in. And this is how you get these wonderful old textures. I love this. I kind of picked this up when I lived in Texas. I just loved the wood. I loved there's a lot of texture in Texas. I'll tell you right now. I just enjoyed learning this. And so barnwood doesn't have to be boring. In fact, I think it's amazing. And see how by giving it a two-color approach to this, I get a lot of color with only two colors. So that's where I'm at right now. I'm gonna let that set up. Okay, I'm gonna now go to the mailbox. I had the mailbox closed, and I'm thinking I'm gonna just rip the front off the mailbox.
What?
Yeah, and I'm gonna maybe stick a bird's nest or something in there. So I'm gonna very quickly just give myself a very light indication of where the base. I want to make sure that I know what I'm painting. I tend to draw what I'm doing. I like to kind of pre-draw it, have it lightly on the paper so I can see what I'm doing. If you don't, you got to do the. You better be right. I like to make sure I'm going to be right. So I'm going to kind of maybe stick some kind of bird nest in here. So I'm just giving myself a little idea where I'm going to put things. All right, so I'm happy with that. I don't need a lot of detail here. But what I am going to do is I'm going to create kind of a dark area up here.
What'd you just mix up?
Some evil concoction. It is basically the burnt sienna and the indigo together. I'm just trying to create a very dark, and I'm putting it on dry, and then you'll note that I'm going to take this paint while it's still wet on the paper. I'm just going to drag some of it down. What I'm trying to do is I want to be able to see, we're going to have shadow in there, but I do want to kind of be able to see, where the bird's nest is going to be, what kind of values. So I'm just getting some color in here so I can kind of see what I'm doing. Usually with watercolors, you work from dark to light to dark, putting your lightest colors first and then, going from there. But sometimes I gotta put some value in there so I can see what I'm doing. This seems to be working for me. I want to make sure of wherever my base is. Okay. All right. So obviously my light will be coming in from this direction. So I will have this probably fairly uh, deeply shadowed, which means this side of the mailbox is going to be deeply shadowed also. So, although it won't be as dark because it's on the outside. Most astute of you, Mr. McGuire. All right. So there's my nest. I got a little color in there. Okay, so I think that's going to be good enough to get me situated here for the inside of the box. And now I'm going to come to the side of the box. And I think rust, I like making it out of a couple different things, different colors. Sometimes I put a tiny bit of yellow ochre in there, and I'll mix it with the burnt sienna, and it kind of gives it a little more golden color, because we don't want it to be all dark too quickly. So basically we want to, build our colors now. So I'm starting, I put that light coat on first, and now I'm dragging down a little, like I said, the stuff with the yellow ochre. I add a little bit more. And I want it to feel like the rust has slowly been coming down over the thing and just, kind of creating a little rivulets or streams of, rust color coming down the side of the box. Like maybe the box isn't totally rusty, pretty much, but not quite. And at this point, again, I'm actually dropping water in here. And what I am doing is sort of like what I did with the wood. I am forcing the paint to go towards the edges and creating a few hard lines. So I think at this point I'm going to pause on the mailbox for a little bit so that I can come back in. I'm gonna start adding. I gotta let that dry. I'm sorry, but I'm gonna come back into the background a little bit now. I'm gonna start adding some other color into the grasses. Nothing's ever perfect. Happy green. We got to put some yellow dead grass in there. So what I'm doing is, again, I'm working it dry. I'm putting fine lines in. But what I do like to do is then I'll come back in and I'll maybe soften some of this up with just a little bit of water. You don't hit it all, you just hit some of it. And it kind of gives you the feeling of, that half loose, half wet watercolor feel. If you do all hard lines, it gets almost too technical. I don't know how to say it. You want watercolors to be, a little loose. I do detailed stuff, but you don't want it to be all detail. And honestly, it took me a long time to kind of learn that. The other thing I discovered is you put a ton of detail into something and then step 5 feet away and it all blends into a kind of a mush anyway. So it's like why am I killing myself drawing individual leaves when, you know, a clump of color could represent leaves just as easily and look just as good too. That's the other part of it, and look watercolory. I know there's a technical term for that. Watercolory. All right. So I've added a little brown, a few more sticks and twigs. I'm even going to kind of come in front here. Meanwhile, my box is drying up very nicely up there. What I like to do, especially with the background, I like to, you know, keep varying the color of the foreground, background kind of weeds and stuff. And if it's wet, you know, you can have kind of loose, have a loose feel to the, you know, the sticks and twigs are not all intensely sharp images. So by having a little moisture in there, these little twigs and things I'm throwing in kind of blend away a little bit. You can see it right here, and they don't look quite so harsh. Now, one of the things I'm going to do with this piece is I am going to probably put a little bigger branch or stick or small tree, okay, into the background here a little bit. But for right now,
I need to pause.
Okay, I'm gonna take a break, and we'll come back and continue. All right, so everything's dry again, and I'm ready to get back to work. I'm going to add a few more. I'm kind of working on detail now. So we've got all the basic colors in, and now we're just slowly gonna kind of finish this up.
Not too slow.
Yeah, that's I knew it. I knew it. Yeah, and we're gonna try to finish this up in a reasonable amount of time. So one of the things I like doing is, as you can see, I'm adding dry brush. Now I'm taking the burnt sienna and the indigo and kind of mixing them together. I'm just putting in a few more fine cracks and fine lines, just to get just a wee bit more texture on my post. And one of the things I'm going to say about this is don't overdo it. I show people this technique and then they put so many lines in, it's again, you step back 5 feet and it becomes mud, you know. You can't even, so you want to keep, you know, enough line work in there, but, you know, not so much that it's just overdone. All right, now I also kind of want to create a bit of a shadow, at least on one side of this thing. So we did mention that the light would be coming from this direction. So I'm taking, you know, my indigo and a little bit of burnt sienna to one side of my post, and I'm just gently going to bleed it with a little bit of water. Bleed that color back this way. So now my post, kind of gives it a roundish, a little more rounder shape, and gives it the feeling of three-dimensionality, shadow, that kind of thing there. So, oops, wrong one. A little more indigo. And a little bit of the burnt sienna. I'm just up at the top here. What I want to do is kind of create the shadow of the of the mailbox itself. Okay. On the post. So, how's that for delayed speaking? There we go. So now I got a little bit of a shadow there. So, there, I'm happy with that. So, almost happy. I'm going to add just a little more value over here. And I'm going to add a little more of the brown just to break up the shadow so it isn't all just one, you know, blue-gray color. So, although I think it's almost, there we go. There. I like that. All right, now I am going to attempt to create a little more rust on the top of the mailbox, bleeding down the side. Now, one of the things, I'm using the indigo and the burnt sienna now to create a little more color, make it a little bit darker. And as you can see, I am applying it in the roundish shape of the mailbox, you know how it comes down. And it's fairly dark and no water. It's not wet. I'm just applying it as a dry brush. But now I'm going to take a little bit of water and take some of it and again just kind of bleed it down. And I'm kind of softening some of this line work here. I don't want you don't want too much going on. If it gets too busy, then it's going to lose something also. So, all right, so I got that going. And what I do want to do is I now want to really kind of darken the inside of the mailbox that I've created here. So I'm pulling out a lot more of the burnt sienna. I'm going to add a little more of the, a ton more of the indigo. So I'm going to kind of bring it over here a little bit. There we go. I'm leaving this little light area here. That is going to be my kind of the lip or the front of this thing, but I haven't put any detail into it yet. This I am now trying to get just some really good value towards the back here. Now I'm creating the shadow. The shadow. All right. Like I said, you put the paint in, it's a little bit wet. Let the paint do some of the work for you. You can lift it. I do this a lot. I will manipulate the paint with gravity.
Bob Ross didn't do that.
Yeah, he's His stuff was too big. His didn't flow. Anyway. But yeah, with watercolor, you can pick it up. Is it visible?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You can pick it up, let it move a little bit. Okay. So I'm going to let that kind of set up. I was going to put some nesting material in there. Can't really play with it at the moment. I could put in, I don't know which red this, ooh, no. See what red this is. Hey, that might work right there. So this is deep red. Technical term, right?
Mm-hmm. I like the fancy names.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna stick my little flag that is still on this old, doesn't have a front, but by God, it has a.
Does the flag up mean that there's mail to pick up?
Exactly. So just get that color in there, a little bit of color, just kind of fun. But I am waiting for, but I think I am going to attempt to, I'm going to attempt to drag some of that material out of the nesting material out of the mailbox. Okay. So I'm going to use this is the burnt sienna, yellow ochre, trying to make it look like grasses. Does it look like grass?
Sure, dead grass.
Dead grass. All right. Hi, for those at home, I'm just picking on Mark. He thinks I draw and paint way too much dead grass. All right, so yeah, there we go. Starting to feel like there's something in there. Okay. Are we okay time-wise, or?
We got about 8 minutes.
Okay. He's got me on a schedule. All right, there. That's I kind of like the ripping the front off this mailbox, putting some sticks and twigs in there. I think it just makes it a little more interesting. Okay. So I'm going to grab again a little more of the indigo burnt sienna combo, and I want to sharpen up some of the edges, I guess. Kind of give it the feel that it is a metallic beastie. It had, rolled steel, that kind of thing. So I wonder if there should be bird poops on here too.
We'll save that for another painting.
All right, so now I'm more or less kind of dry brushing some of this material down. As you can see, it's not all one value. So And we could probably, in good conscience, actually make it look like it was another color at one time. But I don't know what color that would be. So the front's a little beat up, a little bent. Yeah, okay. And actually gonna rest up the little flag a little brown. Some very dark areas. I'm gonna just punch a couple holes in here. One of the things we need eventually is to get to the very, like any watercolor, even the rusty sections, all of it, you need to get to the very dark. Got to have those values. That's what I'm applying now. Is the very last of the darker colors, the burnt, the rusty gold. So I'm just adding a little bit of this very dark, and it just makes everything else kind of pop up. So, according to you, Keith. All right, so. Good, okay. I am now, the more I do this, the more I want to keep adding dead crap coming out of the mailbox. It's probably, I'm overdoing it, but I think that'll work. All right, I'm looking now that I put some other value in here, the darks. It looks like I probably should come down the side of this, create a little more shadow here, but it's not, not a big deal. I'm just adding a little more value. The indigo, burnt sienna, and I'm trying to get it fairly dark because obviously when you do this, you don't always get it right on the first shot, or as you add something, it changes something else, and then you might have to do a little more. Again, I'm just taking a little bit of water to the edge of that color just to soften it up a little bit. There. Okay. Now, I can do, at this point, I'm going to grab a little bigger brush and grab the indigo, the burnt sienna, create kind of a light gray, not the same bluish gray, but a lighter gray. I'm just going to maybe kind of build a branch or two here. Just because
you didn't have enough dead things in this.
That's right.
Picture.
This might not be dead. It might be dormant. Yeah, that's the ticket. It's relaxing. And the same with the stump. You want to kind of get a little value on one side of the stick or the other. So all I'm doing is just screwing around a little bit, giving it that, gosh, we're not maintaining our mailbox look because the farm burned down. Oh, that's sad.
More dead things.
Yeah. And as you can see, it's an old nest. Obviously, there's nothing alive in it. All right, so, and remember, boys and girls, trees, sticks, twigs, they tend to go from fat to thin. Can't stress that enough. I teach and I teach classes, and I'm always amazed at some of the interesting trees that you can develop out of your imagination. Okay, so this was just to kind of give it a little more, oomph.
I need to pause.
All right, so I've added the sticks and twigs. One of the things that once I did put more color in this, more value, if you'll notice the background leaves and grass at the bottom kind of faded away because we got a lot more value. So all I'm going to do is add...
They all died.
Yeah, oh yeah. I'm just going to add a little more color, a wee bit more color on the bottom. So I'm just grabbing a little deeper green, a little more green, a little less paint, or a little less water, a little more paint, okay? And the other thing about this, I'm going to say very quickly, is like the post, like everything else, the trees and stuff, clumps of grass, that kind of thing, also have, shadows and value. So I'm just kind of trying to be a little quicker, real quick rather.
If you want to see Keith paint something happy, he did an Easter duck with some eggs and poppies for Mother's Day. Go back to our old videos before he went into this dark.
It's not dark. It's a country chic. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Anyway, hang on. I'm just adding a little. I want to add a little value to the little grasses and things at the bottom, which means that like there's shadows in clumps of grass. So, and that's what I'm trying to get to real quick. So I just want to hit a few little, darker patches. And maybe just kind of, there we go. So you'll have a little lighter area here, but you'll come down and be maybe a little bit darker here and there. This is pretty close. This is, again, what I like to do, and I recommend, after you paint a painting, put it up on the mantle, look at it for a couple days, add, clean it up, do what you got to do, but kind of study it a little bit. See, what did I do right? What do I want to improve? What do I want to work on? It really, the other thing that's I think a very important thing to do is ask other people. Don't be afraid to ask other people. What do you think? It helps. It helps a lot. So let's call it quits here. And anything else I need to know or say?
Just the usual. Thanks for watching. Check out our old videos for happier things and maybe even a few other dead videos.
Yes, exactly.
Keith also does illustrations, and you can see that there. New stuff comes out just about every week. Check out the website. Follow the link in the description to our website for this video, and there will be a list and links to purchase all the same materials that Keith used: the Schminky paints, the Arches paper, the Lowell Cornell brushes. If you buy through our links, it helps us a little bit. You don't pay any extra. Or support your local art store. That's always good too. But That's about it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Thank you, everybody. Bye. Yay.